How you doing, apes? Welcome to another lecture. We're going to continue our bummer of a unit on water pollution, and today what we're going to look at is non-chemical water pollution. So let's get right into it here. So there's actually four different types of non-chemical water pollution we're going to look at today. And first one, we're going to look at solid wastes, things like garbage. I'll get more into detail. This problem with sediments ending up in our waterways, the changes of temperature of a waterway, and then finally we're going to understand something we don't really look at often, but sound pollution in the ocean. So let's start with solid waste. So this is anything garbage that ends up in landfills or even sludge. And sludge, again, is just the solid from our human wastewater. And most of the time, as I said, it's disposed in landfills, but some cases it is dumped into bodies of water. And I'm sure you've heard about it now. It was discovered in 1997. We'll get into that in a second here, but you have this Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And you guys remember when we talked about the gyres of the ocean, that great circulation from the equator to the poles and vice versa. So what's been going on is these gyres have been collecting that garbage, and it's just created this huge patch in the middle of the ocean. And then eventually it will end up on beaches. So here's a little more detail what we're talking about. So here's that gyre. Remember, it goes along the equator, I should say down the California coast towards Japan, and then back again. So essentially, that garbage, that plastic that's off the coast of California there is actually from Japan and the Philippines, whereas our garbage, our plastic that ends up in the ocean is actually the Western Garbage Patch. So the person that discovered it, really cool guy, Captain Charles Moore. He was just kind of out there sailing in the ocean, and he stumbled upon this, and now he's devoted his life to talking to people about it and trying to clean it up. So we'll talk more about him in class. And then, like we said, this garbage ends up in beaches, and not only just beaches, but then some of the other effects, like plastic rings from six packs, can strangle animals. So you can see just a one little piece of trash can cause how much detrimental effect it can cause. Something cool though, I want to add in here, but there are companies trying to promote good instead of having detrimental effects. So there's a six-pack ring that is edible, which I thought was pretty cool. Scary thing, medical waste. So this was started to be an outcry in the 70s and 80s because you had this medical waste just washing up on beaches. So I mean, imagine hydroponic needles, walking around barefoot on a beach. So as a result of this happening, the practice of dumping garbage in the ocean was pretty much stopped in the early 80s. But unfortunately, in developing countries, there's no real political mechanism or even money to stop people from dumping in oceans. So this is still occurring in other parts of the world. Continuing now with coal and ashlag, it's just what's ever left over, the solid waste from the coal power plant. And again, these contain those toxic metals, mercury, lead, and arsenic. And here's the crazy thing. The EPA considers this waste a special waste. So what that means is it's exempt from federal regulations. So for the disposal of hazardous waste, this stuff doesn't fit into that category, which is kind of scary considering it contains those metals. So hopefully regulations step up in the near future. Okay, moving on to the next type of pollution is sediment pollution. So these are due to human activities. Anything that increases the amount of sediment. This could be through construction, through plowing of agricultural fields, and then just even remember vegetation, just the roots of the trees and the plants that live near a waterway do a great job of holding on to sediment. And the sediment in our waterways right now, 70% of it is coming from these human actions. So what are some of these effects when sediment ends up in the waterways? Well, first off, it reduces the amount of sunlight. No sunlight means less aquatic plants, and we all know herbivore or plants are the basis of most food chains. It can clog the gills of fish, and even further down the stream, if all that sediment just starts falling out, usually when it hits a body of water like the ocean, like a delta, will form, and all that sediment will even clog the gills of oysters and clams. And again, we know this sediment is important for floodplains, so the increased nutrients results in eutrophication in the waterways as well. All right, third one, we have our thermal pollution. This is just any substantial change of water temperature, and it's mainly due to industry and power plants, steel mills, paper mills. And what's happening is the water is actually increasing by 10 to 15 degrees. That's about 18 to 27 degrees warmer than from what the source they took out of. So what we see happening is thermal shock. And here's a picture outside from the Olympic Games. This is where they were supposed to do the rowing, and they had increased temperatures that week, and just and with all the industry going on as well, thermal shock killed off these fish. So what happens is temperatures increase, and warmer temperatures do not contain as much dissolved oxygen as cold water. So what happens is the fish respiration increases, which means oxygen decreases, and essentially the animals just suffocate. So, and this is what kind of I just talked about just there, and this gives you an idea of how it all works. They pull the water from the river. When it cools the machinery or whatever it is they're doing, they put it back. Just that increased temperature, remember, about 10 to 15 degrees, just has horrible effects on the aquatic environment. Lastly, and again, it might strike you kind of strange that we're talking about noise pollution in the ocean, but believe it or not, and imagine the vastness, how huge the ocean is, and how many animals rely on this essentially sonar to communicate. And what happens is our ships, sonar from the military, interfere with their communication, and especially the really loud sonar. These affect animals such as whales. Whales will rely on this low frequency, long distance communication, and this does a great job of showing you, again, there's nothing blocking the sound waves. You have the continents, yes, but this vast ocean, again, the sounds can just go on for miles and miles. And what we're seeing as a result of this is, especially military sonar, like I said, is it affects the whales so much that you see these mass strandings or whales getting lost because it's just getting in the way of their way of communication. So fortunately, the good things that are happening is shipbuilders are starting to design ships equipped with quieter propellers. Unfortunately, in 2003, a federal judge rejected the U.S. Navy's request to install a network of long-range sonar systems. That was a good thing, but unfortunately, back then in 2008, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled the president could exempt the Navy from that. So any environmental laws. So sound pollution is going to be something we're going to have to really focus on in the future, as with the other ones. As always, go to the website if you need anything, or come see me. See ya.